What's up, guys? Mike, UK Urban Prepper here. We're here to talk about wartime Britain and what that would look like modern day. With all the talk of World War III going on, and it seems to be inevitable, but we don't know when. Now, not trying to scare you, this is not a case of dig a hole and go into a nuclear bunker. This is based on an article I read, and it was about a professor who studies these kind of things and how he thought it would go. So, to briefly summarize, let's go through what we'd expect to see. Petrol and diesel would be virtually unobtainable for ordinary people. Medicines would quickly become subject to severe rationing and would soon disappear altogether. The more of Europe that fell to Russia, the less food imports we would get. Nights would become dark to save electricity, with the street lights, etc., becoming non-essential. We could all be subject to a curfew to stop looting and potential martial law to enforce that. All adults between the ages of 18 and 40, male and single females, would be eligible to be drafted. That's what would happen to us during the wartime. And how could that end? How does it all end? Well, ideally it ends with a NATO victory or peace. But Professor Glees, a historian and political scientist at the University of Buckingham, who published the article that I read, predicts that within a month of conventional war, a British Quisling government would be established, probably under a well-known domestic politician known to be sympathetic to Putin. Within a year, the UK would become a Russian colony and run like Russia, with secret police, forced labour camps, and anyone showing the least opposition to the Russian regime. Russian language would be taught in our schools. Russian or pro-Russian Quislings would run our public institutions. The royal family would go to Canada, and resistance leaders would try and establish a following from secret bases in Wales and Scotland. Now, that sounds extreme, but that's what his prediction was. So how accurate you think that is, I'm not sure. But let's look through the key points of this. So the first one is fuel shortages. Now, we know this is not an extreme case scenario. We've seen fuel shortages in this country. When there's been problems at Calais and things like that, we've seen pumps run out. We've seen no fuel left signs up. We've seen queues at the pumps only to run out completely just before lockdown with the pandemic. So we know this can happen, and we know it happens relatively quick. Despite them fuel tankers in your local petrol station being as big as they are, once there's a queue there, it does not take long for them to empty. And then how quick is it produced and where's it coming from is the question. So petrol cars will actually be better off than diesel cars, and I know most preppers would probably favour diesel. And let's not forget that a lot of people's generators are diesel generators as well. So diesel might go very quickly, not just for the fact that the military will need to keep a massive reserve of diesel, but the Russian Federation produces 33.6% of our diesel. And then from other countries, it's imported from all over the place. And there's a graph there that shows you the imports of diesel. So you can see how many countries would be affected depending on how far the war spread. So diesel could run out very quickly. Hope you've got a horse handy. Next, medication. So medication's already starting to be affected, and it's already starting to be reduced because we do import a lot of our medication from Israel. Every day, more than 2.2 million generic products make their way to patients. Around a quarter of the generic medicines used in the UK are manufactured here. So that means 3/4 of the medicines that we use are imported. So again, as that conflict spreads, as countries become unable to export them, then that's where them shortages come in. And this one, again, is not extreme because we're already seeing it. Food shortages. Now, this is generally a given. Obviously, in World War II, we had Dig for Victory, which encouraged people to go about their allotments and gardens and grow what food and vegetables they can. Is that still relevant now in this fast-paced world of same-day delivery, next-day delivery, supermarkets on every corner? Yes, it is. We saw how quickly them supermarket shelves emptied during the COVID lockdown period. And about 54% of food on the plates in the UK is produced in the UK. So that leaves 46% of that being imports. You reduce 46% off them shelves in supermarkets. And if you thought they emptied quickly during the pandemic, think about what it'd be there. Food shortages is a massive one. And I think that's one of the first impacts we'll see. Whether they combat that with rationing and things like that, I can very well see it. They were limiting what we could buy during a influenza virus, practically. You know, we suddenly couldn't buy clothes because it was non-essential. I mean, I just want a new pair of shoes. How's a pair of shoes on my feet to walk unessential? Craziness. But they were doing it then, so you can full well expect if there's massive food shortages that we'll be back to a rationing style system. Next, the power supply. So the power supply will be less affected now than it would have been 10 years ago, which is the only thing that seems to have gone on that trajectory, because we do produce a lot more of our power now than we used to. If you look at this graph here, this runs up to from 1998 to 2014, but this incline has kept going up. So the power supply won't be that bad, but we do still have a significant import of it. So the savings will have to be made. I think you will still be okay day-to-day power usage in your house, but they'll make the savings on things like street lights, lighting up the motorways, lighting up the roads. So it'll be much darker evenings, and people will just be encouraged to save power for the war effort. Turn the light off, propaganda campaigns like that. So the power supply could be effective, but I don't think it is in such a major way than some people will tell you and some preppers will tell you, where, the gas reserves are so low, we're going to be out without power. The gas reserves are low. We do import gas, but it's a tiny percentage. There will be certain homes and certain systems that can't be without power. You can't cut off somebody's home to power if they have an oxygen machine there. So I don't think you'll be affected, your power supply in your house, but things around there, like your street lights, anything unnecessary stuff will be cut off. Sporting events with large displays, things like that, all that will be stopped. Next, one we spoke about recently is conscription. So conscription has been ruled out by the government in the UK, saying that proudly the UK is traditionally a voluntary force. A flippant statement when that voluntary force, had to be forced voluntary during world wars. So what it is now compared to what it would be in a war status is two completely different things. So I think we can take that statement with a pinch of salt that no, it's voluntary. That's fine right now. But if we are in a state of war, if war is declared and Britain is at war, then you just have to look at the numbers of troops. This chart here goes from 1981 to 2021. And let me tell you, these numbers have gone down since 2021. 338,000 serving personnel split across the Air Force, Navy, and Army. And in the space of 40 years, which is quite a big space, but we've dropped to 149,000 across them all. And I can tell you now that that's a lot less now. So conscription, if we are to put up any sort of resistance, is obviously needed. There's no way around it. Even with your reserves called into action and everything like that, conscription is a must. We are such a small place, small island to fight off anything that conscription has to happen in that state. Unless we roll over and we become the Russian state, which is the final point. I think it's an extreme scenario to think that after a month of war, this would happen, like he stated. I understand where he's coming from with the statement I said at the beginning from Professor Glees. He is a historian. He's a political scientist from the University of Buckingham. I mean, he's not like just some crazy guy on the street corner shouting this. But to say that a British government would be established, and the way he said politicians sympathetic to Putin was like he almost knew the ones in mind. So, I mean, it's very possible the guy's educated. He might know his stuff. The fact that that's what he does for a living. But I just don't think it would happen that quick. I think the resistance would be more than a lot of people think. I, for one, would be part of that resistance. If I've got to go and find a hovel in Scotland, then fine. But I would definitely be part of that. I don't think after a month of fighting, rolling over and becoming a Russian state is an option. But is it a better option than war? Let me know your thoughts. There's a lot of points we covered there and a lot of crazy opinions and a lot of valid opinions. So, is this all inevitable, or is it just speculation? But we are starting to see signs of little bits of it now with food, medication. Next will be the fuel. So, keep your eyes open for the signs. Keep preparing. Make sure them key points that you personally are ready for. And keep a full tank of fuel, especially if you're running on diesel. Thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye.